Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi has admitted that the situation on the front lines is rapidly deteriorating. The situation is particularly dangerous around Pokrovsk, where Russian troops are advancing on multiple axes. He described a new Russian tactic as total infiltration, where small assault and sabotage units penetrate deep behind Ukrainian lines. Such a tactic is destabilizing logistics and forcing Kiev to divert reserves to plug gaps. The Pokrovsk sector has become one of the most critical flashpoints. Russian forces have surrounded the city from three sides, pushing Ukrainian troops into an increasingly untenable position. Western analysts compare Russia's advance to water seeping through cracks, exploiting every weakness in Ukraine's overstretched defenses. Ukrainian soldiers describe the fighting as a game of roulette, with Russian drones and sabotage teams making every movement deadly. Russian troops are penetrating both Pokrovsk and Myrnograd, fighting on the streets. They are rapidly tightening their grip around the agglomeration. Fighting rages in the southern outskirts of Myrnograd near Suky Yar, while Russian units push through tree lines near Promin to the east. Meanwhile, on Ukrainian media Espresso TV, retired US Army General and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Wesley Clarke, discussed, among other things, the three main directions of Russia's actions in the war. One of these, the retired general said, was to, and I quote, penetrate Ukrainian defenses and seize more territory. There is still a concentrated Russian effort near Sumy in the northeast, and they continue trying to secure and block key logistics hubs, particularly around Pokrovsk, he commented. Based on previous assessments, he says that the Russian ultimate objective likely remains the seizure of Odessa and the northern Black Sea coast to cut off Ukraine from international trade routes. Lastly, according to a Ukrainian MP, Anna Skoropod, almost 400,000 Ukrainian servicemen have abandoned their units without authorization, and many, including volunteers, have no plans to return due to abysmal treatment from superiors. In an interview with Ukrainian media on Sunday, the lawmaker said that while the figure does not represent irretrievable losses, as many of those going AWOL eventually return, this is not always the case. In quotations, many will never return because it is principled. You cannot treat like animals those who volunteered, fought for 3 years without seeing family, she said. So these are the topics I will discuss in today's video: the worsening situation for Ukraine around Pokrovsk, Constantinovka, and a brief update about what's going on up in the north near Kupyansk, where Russia has made some recent serious advances. Then I will highlight some brief excerpts from the interview with the US retired General Wesley Clarke, before going on to discuss the state of desertion in the Ukrainian ranks, according to Ukrainian MP. Now please help keep this show running amidst the current shadow ban with super thanks or PayPal donations. And most of all, join the channel membership by watching the video screen trailer in the end screen to see what you get. Now let's get into it. The breakthrough to Pokrovsk came swiftly, writes Russian sources. Elite assault units of the Russian Center Group of Forces pushed from two directions. They advanced through the northern districts, securing positions along Tchaikovskovo Street before striking deeper into the city. At the same time, Russian forces are paving the way to the center from the southern outskirts. Clashes were reported in the area of the local railway station and the city administration building. Now, brutal street battles rage near Schmidt Street and the railway station, where Russian fighters methodically dismantled Ukrainian resistance block by block. Ukrainian media, in a rare moment of candor, confirmed fierce clashes on the city streets, admitting that Russian troops had reached the core of Pokrovsk defenses. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a desperate attempt to downplay the disaster, claimed that only small groups of Russian soldiers had entered the city and were allegedly destroyed. Yet his hollow reassurances crumble under the weight of reality. If Ukrainian forces truly held all their positions, Russian troops would not be fighting in the city center. British journalists embedded near Pokrovsk report that Ukrainian soldiers openly admit the city's fall is inevitable. Supply routes to the city have been severed, with Russian forces cutting off key roads near Rodinsky and isolating Ukrainian units. Nearly half of all Ukrainian military convoys attempting to reinforce the garrison are now destroyed before reaching their destination. The recent loss of Nikhanorovka and Suvorovo has further destabilized Ukrainian positions, leaving their troops exposed and outflanked. To the south, Russian forces press forward from Udachny expanding their zone of patrol by 700 meters over the past week and tightening the grip on Pokrovsk lifelines. Meanwhile, in Kotliny and Puvomaysky, Russian reconnaissance and probing attacks test Ukrainian defenses, identifying weak points for the next decisive push. The fall of Novoyukranka has opened a sudden corridor toward the city, while fierce fighting in Losivka secures a staging ground for future assaults. According to Russian reports, Ukrainian reserves hastily thrown into the battle are insufficient to stem the Russian tide. Reports indicate that Ukrainian troops demoralized and outgunned are losing cohesion. The scandal surrounding the 34th Ukrainian Coastal Defense Brigade, the soldiers openly accuse the inexperienced 27-year-old commander of incompetence, only deepens the sense of disarray. Even more telling is Kiev's frantic reshuffling of territorial defense brigades into regular army units in this direction, a clear sign of exhaustion and dwindling manpower. The death of 20-year-old Junior Sergeant Angelina Matinyuk, a reconnaissance officer killed near Pokrovsk, underscores the Ukrainian army's reckless deployment of untrained personnel, including young women, into near suicidal operations against Russian positions. And now I will show you with maps how the Russians tightened their noose around Pokrovsk between July 20th and August 2nd. So according to Ukrainian sources, and from the Ukrainian perspective facing east, despite all efforts, the Russian armed forces have made no progress on the right flank of Pokrovsk defense, so they have thrown even more forces into a breakthrough attempt on the left flank. This, admittedly, threatens not only Pokrovsk and Constantinovka, but also Dobropilia and the entire northwestern part of the Donetsk region. There, the Russian forces could achieve an operational breakthrough of the front, posing great risks for Ukraine, while one group of Russian forces is fighting on the outskirts of Myro-Lublivka and Novo-Ekonomichny to break through to Munograd. Another large group is pushing toward Dobropilia. They have already occupied Mayak and are attacking the road between the villages of Shakove and Mali Shakove. This road would open the way for Russian forces to Dobropilia. It is currently unknown whether the Russians have enough strength to attack the town, but if they do, it will significantly disrupt Ukrainian logistics and stretch their defensive efforts. Even more threatening is the breakthrough by Russian troops towards Rodinsky, which they manage between two bodies of water, indicating weak defense organization at these positions. At the same time, the Russian forces have captured Fyodorivka and are advancing toward the northern outskirts of Rodinsky. Thus, in the coming days, the Russians will be able to attack Rodinsky from both sides, making the village's defense quite vulnerable. What's worse, after Rodinsky, a large open field stretches toward Pershiny, which is key to Ukrainian logistics. The battles for Rodinsky will determine the future of Pokrovsk's defense, as without logistics, the Ukrainian forces will not be able to hold the city for long. According to Pavlo Lakichuk, head of security programs at the Center for Global Studies Strategy, during a broadcast on Espresso TV, in quotations, the Russian enemy is now moving into a direct assault phase of Pokrovsk. Around the city, or rather, what's left of it, a semi-ring is closing in. Attacks are ongoing from the south, from the Soledar direction. On the outskirts, they are trying to bypass the city from the Dnepropetrovsk region in the southwest, aiming to cut the Pokrovsk-Mezova and Pokrovsk-Pavlohad highways. The Pokrovsk-Mezova route was already cut. The fighting continues in the area of Yurozyny, he said. Lakichuk added that after reaching the Pokrovsk-Konstantinivka highway, Russian forces regrouped. Once they got to the Pokrovsk-Konstantinivka highway, they regrouped there, he said, brought in reserves, and first tried to push along the road toward Leningrad. But they were diverted and shifted focus to attacking from the north. That's how this pocket formed. Very dangerous. Clearly, the heaviest fighting in this area is still ahead, the military expert said. Now, although Russian forces announced the capture of Chasiv, many Ukrainian sources still claim that this information is false, and that the Ukrainian armed forces still hold a significant part of the town, and Russian forces only recently seized a few positions near the beach and forest park area. Meanwhile, to the south, they report Russian forces are trying to break through along the road by attacking the village of Supotny. On the southern flank of Konstantinovka, which is quite wide, the Russian army is steadily advancing from Belivka to Bilohora, within Toretsk and Leonidivka, and most painfully in Yablonivka. Through Yablonivka, the Russians could reach the shore of the Kleban-Lisk Reservoir, which protects Constantinovka from the south and serves as a natural defense line. On the other hand, Ukraine has strong defensive positions here, so a quick breakthrough for the Russian troops is unlikely. Most likely, as on the Pokrovsk front, the Russians will approach the city closely, but direct the main offensive through Ukraine's rear, where they are currently attacking Pokrovsk and Poltavka. Here, the Russian forces aim to encircle Constantinovka by reaching Druzhivka. However, it is unlikely that Russian forces can sustain simultaneous offensives on both Pokrovsk and Constantinovka. They will have to choose. For now, it is clear that the focus has shifted to Pokrovsk, meaning that all attacks near Constantinovka are likely preparatory in nature. And lastly, on Kupyansk, Russian forces have captured Radivka and advanced westward toward Pokrovka. They have effectively reached the northern outskirts of Kupyansk. If Ukrainian forces fail to push them back, the Russians may build up strength in the area and eventually launch urban combat, not on the left, but on the right bank of the Oskil River. However, the situation is not yet critical, as the Russian troops still lack sufficient forces for a full-scale assault on the town, and transferring troops from the left to the right bank remains a significant challenge.
И смотрите, мое мнение разбежалось в тот момент, когда я был в Харькове, уже в больнице, и там вот они себя ведут не очень хорошо. Попадая в больницу, они чувствуют в больнице, так как на боевых, там на них...
Almost 400,000 Ukrainian servicemen have abandoned their units without authorization, and many, including volunteers, have no plans to return due to abysmal treatment from superiors. Ukrainian MP Anna Skorokhod has said,
прямое, когда у нас людям, которые каким образом не находятся на передовой, начисляют сотку, потом эти деньги забирают, или когда военных используют для того, чтобы они строили дома командирам или же делали ремонт.
According to Skorokhod, these people deserve the right to return home to their families, to their children, wives, to get back an ordinary life, but they are being told he will return only after victory, which only exacerbates the situation, she said, stressing that this kind of treatment from the leadership is a key reason for soldiers going off the radar. Ukrainian journalist Vladimir Boyko reported last month that the authorities had filed more than 107,000 criminal cases on desertions and AWOLs in the first half of 2025. He said the total number of cases had exceeded 230,000 since the escalation of the Ukrainian conflict in 2022, with the real number of incidents possibly even higher. The chief reasons for Ukrainian soldiers leaving are exhaustion, lack of motivation, and bureaucratic hurdles, such as soldiers eligible for discharge being refused release, according to local officials and media reports. Last month, Skorokhod said that another notable problem is corruption and extortion of combat pay by commanders. Ukraine announced general mobilization shortly after the start of the conflict, barring men between the ages of 18 and 60 from leaving the country. Last year, it lowered the draft age from 27 to 25 while tightening mobilization rules. The forced conscription campaign has triggered repeated violent clashes between reluctant recruits and draft officers. Last week, public discontent erupted into a riot in the city of Indonesia, where protesters tried to force the release of newly mobilized men. Violent encounters occurred between demonstrators and police, with numerous arrests. Lastly, and quite interestingly, General Wesley Clarke told a Ukrainian interviewer that Russia is not deploying their best equipment in the fight against Ukraine. At the same time, they are building up the forces in Belarus, opposite the Baltic states, and also opposite Finland. This appears to be preparation for a prolonged war. In terms of Russia's war strategy, he felt the Russians are attempting to move forward in three directions. First, to intimidate and break the morale of the Ukrainian people through increasingly massive and destructive drone strikes on population centers, while simultaneously targeting Ukraine's military-industrial production. This is a clear focus of the Russian campaign at the moment. They are expanding their drone infantry and enhancing their capacity to strike with missiles, including those supplied by North Korea. Second, he says, to penetrate Ukrainian defenses and seize more territory. There is still a concentrated Russian effort near Sumy in the northeast, and they continue trying to secure and block key logistics hubs, particularly around Pokrovsk. Based on previous assessments, the ultimate objective likely remains the seizure of Odessa and the northern Black Sea coast to cut Ukraine off from international trade routes. Third, to build up their forces in a way that intimidates NATO. stretches NATO's resources and keeps Western allies distracted with the defense of the Baltic states and Finland. At the same time, Russia is demonstrating its nuclear capabilities in an attempt to deter further intervention by the United States or other Western powers.
Перед нами! Уходи чуть влево, уходи еще!